Hello everyone, and today we have with us Miss Prachi Mehta. She is an experienced mediator in a lot of complex family matters, corporate disputes, and multi-party, multi-issue cases. She's got a lot of experience with mediation. She trains a lot of people, and let's hear from her. Today she'll be talking about psychology and its aspects related to mediation. As such, psychology is an interesting topic. Probably we can start guessing a few things about the people, the way they dress up or the way they come prepared to the meeting with all serious face and everything. And maybe that's where you can help us understand where does the psychology start or when does it start? Does it start from the day we enter into the dispute or only once we enter into the room? What do you say?
So thank you, Dr. Reddy, for this opportunity to talk to you. In terms of psychology, obviously every dispute gets a little bit of a different flavor because of the involvement of the people in the dispute. And every person is different from the other. In terms of psychology usage, we as mediators actually bring in psychologists where we feel a lot of emotional issues are entangled with a lot of commercial issues. Now, I use the term commercial loosely here because we do a lot of family disputes also. But at the end of the day, when the emotional issues are very high for us to look at as mediators, we do involve psychologists. And as mediators, you tend to pick up a few tricks as a psychologist yourself, at least from the psychologists you work around. So we've picked up the tricks about hard talk, soft talk, attack the problem, not the people. So all those technicalities you do pick up. In terms of when the psychology starts, there is a dispute because there is a different psychology, right?
Yes.
Otherwise, there'd be no dispute at all. So that's where it starts. But for us to involve a psychologist is generally a stage where the emotional entanglement is too high.
Okay. Now, how is psychology different from negotiation or mediation?
Well, they're very heavily intertwined. A psychology of a person determines how they are going to negotiate on the table. We might have hard negotiators who would sit down and be like, "This is my stop line. I'm not going to move from here." And that's the first time they open their mouth, right? So, very uncooperative. Then we have people who bend over backwards in terms of negotiation. So, psychology, of course, affects the way you're going to negotiate. But I don't think it's vice versa. A negotiation might affect your psychology. You might give in a little if you see the other person being very benevolent, right? So those do play in as aspects, but we generally see people have very fixed patterns of negotiation, and it's you have to work with that pattern in terms of helping them negotiate.
So, if I'm a good negotiator, would I make a good mediator?
Oh, absolutely, you would. I highly recommend you try one of those since you're such a great negotiator.
Okay.
At the end of the day, all mediation does boil down to negotiations. I mean, if you put aside the legality involved in it, it's solving, you are working pro a deal, right? So, as a mediator, also, you're working pro a deal. You're helping them resolve to a deal where the entanglement goes away, where the dispute goes away, and there is a settlement which is a win win for both parties. So I do think all three of them cross over at some point. I don't know if I would like to take a course on psychology after saying all this, or if I would become a pure negotiator. But all those three aspects do combine in all the professions, I do feel.
Okay. Earlier you said something about soft observation, soft talk, and the cold talks or warm talk. I understand a few of those things, but if can you maybe elaborate a little bit more?
So, as a mediator, and especially somebody who has to handle a lot of high emotional entanglement, especially in family disputes, and actually even in corporate disputes, because at the end of the day, the person sitting across the table does tend to have ego, does tend to have, the importance of self, and they want to be the CEO, and they want to be the COO, and they want to think like the boss. So the emotional issues do get entangled in all kind of matters, and I think if you don't disassociate them by using soft skills, then it's very hard to move forward because Sometimes you literally have to sit down and do a talk where, listen, what are your worst outcomes, what are your best outcomes, and you have to somewhere explain to them that the other party also have a best and worst, and yours and theirs will meet somewhere in the middle. It won't necessarily be only your best or only their best, right? So that kind of soft skill where you can handle a person emotionally and help them start negotiating again, because every negotiation tends to stop and then start and then stop and then start. But the skill comes as a negotiator or a mediator to help that stop, finish, and start again. So I do think the soft skills of being able to talk someone through their thought process and help them start again is where the skill really lies.
Okay. Do you find any difference in the psychology of people in India or US where you have a lot of experience also?
Heavily. So US is very mediation driven, at least in the jurisdictions where I've worked. I've predominantly worked in New York and California. So people are very, very mediation driven. Pre-litigation mediation is extremely high, as you know. It's some of the highest in California. In India, it's in a very nascent stage. So right now, also when I'm doing a matter which is based in US or which is versus a matter based in India, it's very different. In India, we have to start from why you should settle, why it's good for you. In US, we start from the person already knowing he has to do it, and from there on moving towards a deal. So the way the conversations go is obviously very, very different. The biggest interesting factor comes when we have one party from US and one from India, and the Indian party is just like, my God, I don't want to settle this, and I want to take it to the court, and I'm going to teach them a lesson. And the US party is like, hey, I don't want to spend that much, in the court. So it's very interesting. The psychologies do, and the cultural differences play a very, very huge role. But I would say it's very different. US also negotiates mostly on a daily basis, so, in the sense, the mediations would continue from morning till evening, and they would try to crack a deal by the evening, right? And maybe it might roll over into another day if the matter is very large, or they're okay to talk about pure numbers, disassociate the emotions very quickly. But here, we have to work through small batches. So, we generally tend to keep mediations for 2 hours. Then, if required, we go into the next day, the next day. So, here they tend to run longer because a large part is spent in just disassociating and explaining why mediate and why settle.
Now, when it comes to negotiations, I'm not using the word psychology, but what I have, at least in my experience, seen is that you can negotiate better if you also have something, some strength. If you come to the table with nothing and the other party is the one holding all the cards, how good or how successful is your negotiation going to be? So, when it comes to mediation, I'm guessing it's, as you said, negotiation and mediation are more or less intertwining here and there. How do you see that psychology play out? When the one party has nothing to lose, the other party has everything to lose.
Well, honestly, a lot of family matters do start like that, where sometimes either the boy or the girl, depending on the situation of the family, have not much to offer to the other party. But I think the skill lies in bringing both of them together and understanding what their situation, and this is something called as reality testing that we do in mediations. I don't know if you are doing it in your pure negotiated deals. So in a reality testing, we actually explain to them how the matter is going to go in the court. Just because they don't have certain cards on the table doesn't mean that they're going to be disadvantaged if they go through the court system, right? So the reality testing becomes a very important tool at that point, and you have to use it very, very smartly, not to irritate one of the parties off. Right? Okay, then मैं court में देख लूँगा kind of attitude should not come out. So yeah, I don't think that bringing something to the table in a mediation is absolutely required. Of course, if you have it, you have a higher negotiating power, just like you said, but then our tools are such that we are able to help navigate through that issue as well in case there's none.
Now, can I ask you what was your quickest mediation time to resolve a case?
3 hours.
Okay.
So,
That's
contractor dispute
hmm.
for building a restaurant in California. It took us 3 hours to resolve. It's a continuing relationship. They're in the middle of a contract. The guy wants his restaurant completed. The contractor wants paid. They want to get the job done. They're in the middle of the work. They've gone into a dispute. They obviously want to uh, settle, but they don't want to settle on their own because they've reached a point where whoever settles loses face. So, and in that situations, also a mediator is a great person to have in between, because they're going to take the brunt of it all, and then you are going to do your face saving, and you're going to get out, and you're going to be able to carry on your deal forward and work through your contract and be able to continue your business relationship. So, some of those, the business ones are the easiest and the quickest ones.
Okay, that's interesting because when it comes to business deals, the way I have seen, at least here in India, especially with government sectors, is we get to a point of mediation only after the dispute moves ahead and it gets into arbitration or a court, and where people have spent some time, then they realize that they are wasting time, and that's the day they are willing to sit down. But day one, they feel they are strong and they want to go ahead into this litigation or arbitration. And once they start spending time and money, they realize, or they get an opportunity to see the other party's evidence, then they start having self doubts. But when it comes to family disputes, is the other way around. Maybe it's possible to, because most of the time you are threatening. We say threat is more powerful than execution. So in family disputes, you are really threatening but not really taking any action. Until that action is taken, we don't see the deal coming through, and then somebody sitting down and saying, okay, I'm willing to listen.
Yeah. Well, so let me go through what you've just said. So, government is a different animal in every part of the world. It does not work like normal people do. It has a brain of its own, it functions in its own whims and fancies. In India, also, it takes a very, very long time to, despite having contractual obligations, it takes a long time to bring bigger organizations, PSUs, and all to come and mediate, or for that matter, arbitrate also. It takes, the process of just getting approvals is very long. Same for US, I would say. For going through it as a normal man or a private organization, we generally just see it quicker. So it might be that we have to. There's no requirement to explain to the government the benefits of mediation. They'll eventually get to it, but it's just that their internal processes are very long. In terms of people, I do feel like we have to do the explanation part. Oh, here's why you should do it. Or in terms of private corporates, also we have to do the explanation part of why you should do it. And apart from that, the once it starts, I feel they are pretty much all on the same track. So, barring apart the internal processes.
Can I just maybe simplify and say it's a carrot and stick approach,
Oh,
or
of course.
okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's great. But how many of your cases end up going into the, let's say, the psychologist domain,
So
percentage wise?
I'll tell you, in family matters, we do tend to involve a co mediator from sometimes the start. And the reason for that is that, I can also do a mediation like most other organizations do, or most other mediators do, where you're not offering the psychological benefits of that mediation. But for someone like me who's been doing it for a very long time now, and I have seen people come back and say, hey, this document's not working. The agreement's not a working document anymore. We have had differences again and stuff like that. So we started understanding the psychological aspect of it very quickly. And we realized that we have to give a more holistic approach to it, where not only are the finances and the circumstances taken care of, but also your thought process. And that only happens when you involve an expert. I can say, hey, I'm gonna sit here, I'm an expert in mediation, so I'll be able to handle your psychological aspects also, but that's not really true. I will need the help of a psychologist. I will need a clinical psychologist to step in. We have a panel, we have a lead psychologist who runs a panel for us. and she's extremely good at figuring out which psychologist should be sitting on which matter, and that's how we literally deal with it. And sometimes we don't bring them in until we reach that impasse. Oh, we are reaching an impasse, and we're not going to be moved forward from here unless and until we involve someone who disentangles the issues going on, the undercurrents here. So those are the aspects that a psychologist is able to handle, and I have to say it has been a phenomenal way of dealing with things. And by the way, to go back to our pre-chat where we had not started this interview, David Hoffman was the one who had planted this idea in my head in Harvard University. So while I was there, this was his thought process that, why are people not involving psychology in mediation? And that's really where I started thinking about it. So this is 2019, 18 is when I started interacting with him. And since then, we have involved psychologists in our mediations, and it works seamlessly.
I may share one or two of my quick experiences with you quickly. In one case, I was making a cold call to somebody and wanted to get some information, and the other person on the phone was giving a very tough time. They were not interested in talking, but I could hear from their accent, a small tinge of accent. So I said, let's pick a place and say, is there any chance you're from this particular city of a country? And the person said, yes, how do you know that? Well, there's a colleague in my office with a similar accent. And the other person said, but I haven't been in that place for more than so many years, 30 years or something. I said, well, you still have that. And immediately the ice was broken and we were chatting and I got what I wanted.
Right.
In
I
another
can totally
case,
believe that because we do so go through so many of those that cold calls turn into coming to the table for people, and generally that's how an approach is started in mediation. Not always do both parties come to mediate. In fact, most of the times it's one party who comes and says, I want to solve this, but I also don't want to go saying that this is my idea to solve it. How do we go about it? So you have to figure out how to make that cold call. You have to have an answer ready of why you're making that cold call and how did you get to know about this matter, and present the case in a manner where the other party is at least willing to listen to you.
let me share a different example. One time we got some tickets for a TV pilot show. So it was a pilot episode, and the TV producers wanted some feedback. So they gave out free tickets to all the people. And my friends and we were standing in the line. And halfway through, suddenly they come out and say, sorry, the room's full. You have to leave. We'll send you more tickets for the next show. And everybody started to leave. So I said, let me just check with them for a minute. I went to that guy and said, what's the problem? And this was in America. So he was an American. My friends were Americans. I was the only brown skin. But still, I was talking to him politely and said, what was the problem? He said, all the seats are full. So I said, that's fine. We'll stand in the back. And he said, no, well, we take interviews of all the people. We don't have the forms. They're all taken care of. I said, we'll not give feedback, but we'll just watch and we'll leave. So he realized that I was stubborn. I was not going to go out. And whatever I said was making sense to him because I could just stand there, not interrupt him. And I'd be happy if I just walked away. He said, wait for a few minutes, then call me in along with my friends. And we sat down, watched the TV show, gave our feedback, and walked out.
Wonderful. You're a true negotiator.
But as I said, I'm not into mediation much. And that's a lot of feedback I keep getting. People asking me to enter into mediation.
Yes, you must try it. It'll be wonderful for you. And you'll do wonders for others.
Hopefully. But maybe somebody like you could teach me
Oh,
the steps of
I would
mediation.
hardly have any skills apart from what you
Uh,
already do.
I wouldn't say that. Your profile speaks for yourself. But this was a wonderful interaction. And
Like,
we are at the end of our time. And I know that psychology is not a small topic, it's ocean. We need more time, but maybe next time.
sounds good.
Until then,
Thank
once
you
again,
so much.
thank you for the time.
Thanks.